Hello everyone! Hello, welcome to this new stream. This is the time for a new release for Xen Orchestra, and the pace is really fast. We have a lot to cover. Oliver have a lot to cover for this release, a lot to cover. So let's not wait anymore. And Oliver, it's up to you.
Thank you, Mark. Hello, everyone. So, indeed, as Mark said, again, this is a rather big release. And outside the usual pack of new features, we also got some news related to naming and such. So, I will take time to review a bit everything. But we'll start with the, let's say, the core thing that we have for this new release, which is related to backups. As you know, we are always improving the way our backups are working. And this month, we are releasing a new feature, which is kind of an evolution on the backup auto restore that we got almost 1 year ago. So as you remember, if you enable this feature, you could have your backup restored to a storage repository of your choice. And this will check if the operating system is booting, because we detect that the tools inside the VM are booted, and then we could automatically detect that is okay, and then the backup is working. But what we wanted to do in the end is also to give you the possibility to have a kind of a script that will be able to run whatever you want inside of the machine during this check restore, and to be sure that you have everything you need inside the VM, for example, a file or something like this. So there's multiple conditions to be able to run this kind of advanced restore health check. The first one is to add a tag that we'll call exo backup health check restore Xen store, to be sure that obviously the VM is inside a job with the health check enabled, and to be also sure that the script that you are using is started automatically on boot. To give you an idea on how to do that, we took an example for a Linux VM. So the idea there is to test if a SQLite database is correctly there and working. So it's a file on your file system. So the small script is rather simple in the end. We want to be sure that because it's on each start of the VM, this script will only run when there is a specific value doing the backup else check. So this way it's not executed on the normal reboot of your VM. So this way you are confident that things are not mixed. And then after that, if it's in that restore scenario, then we will do the real tests later to be sure that everything is working. So that's the line: if output equal $ SQLite 3 my database dot table to blah blah blah. This will test that this file, my database, is a correct and healthy SQLite database, and then we'll get the error code somewhere if there is an error. But if it works and if it's a success, then we will write into that same Xen store. So as a reminder, the Xen store is a key value database, giving the ability to give some key values, obviously, between the guests, the VM, and the rest of the system. So the Zappy here, and then Xen Orchestra by extension. And so we could write this is a success, but if it's not, then we could write it's a failure. So even if the VM is booting, even if everything seems all right, we could detect if your script is not returning what you expect. And then we could even, on the last line, write the error, error code that is returned by the output value. So this way you could even see the reason of the failure from the script. So that's why it's very flexible. And it's just an example to show you, to demonstrate that this feature can allow you to do whatever you want that will be able to test during a restore. So that's why it's very convenient. And you will could read this script in details in our blog post explaining all the parts. And obviously, if there is more questions regarding this, you can open a thread on our forum. So this is a good way to improve the capability to check your backup, which is truly important. The next kind of really, to me, crucial feature is related to the retry when we do a backup. So as you know, we are kind of switching more and more the backup to using the NBD protocol, which is a simple block protocol. And unlike the VHD export, it allows us to export multiple blocks at the same time. So it's faster, but also reducing the load on the DOM0 when exporting a VM disk. So that's even better. But another perk of using the NBD stuff is the capability to retry more when there's a problem on the block that you are trying to fetch. So now we are providing a retry. For now, it's 5 times, but it might be configurable in the future. But in any case, that's a great improvement, showing that the robustness on the backup will be largely increased thanks to this new feature. Because, we had 1,000 and 1,000 of Xen Orchestra running and doing 1,000 backups every day, every night. So in all those users, sometimes some users got network issues, transient, I don't know, a switch issue, faulty cable, and so on. And one issue can make one VM backup failed. And now with this new feature, it will be a lot more resilient. So it's really exciting, and it gives you, even if you have not an optimal network, the capability to get a backup done regardless what's happening. So that's why it's really important. The next chapter then, it's not a feature, but it's started to discuss and to show to everyone the fact that we want to improve the way we are naming the backups. Because when we started to offer backup into Xen Orchestra, we started with the full, the XVA exports. So we call them the full backup. But then we added the Delta backup. And during the first run of a Delta backup, you got a full. So it was kind of confusing. And now we decided for next features that you will learn about next month, that would be also really exciting. We wanted to rename that in a way that is more clear. So basically, there's always the two big difference backup methods, so the full and the incremental. So what we call the Delta is called now the incremental. But then for the full, depending on the target, so if you do what we call historically a full backup. So it means you are sending the file to a backup repository or a remote. So remote is not a great term, so we also rename a remote to a backup repository. So this will be named the full backup. So it doesn't really change, but at least it's more clear that it's only for this that we'll call it full backup. If you send the full to a storage repository, SR, so it's not a backup repository anymore, but a storage repository that is used by XCPNG or Xen server to store your VM disks, then it will be called the full replication. It's a replication of a VM. It's always full, so it's a full replication. It was named disaster recovery, and even if it could be used for disaster recovery, we wanted to make it more clear as being called full replication. And so by extension, now we are talking about all the incremental, so what we call Delta before. If you send the incremental backup to backup repositories, then it's basically an incremental backup, so removing the Delta backup. And if you send the incremental file to another storage repository, not a backup repository, that will be an incremental replication, formerly the continuous replication. Also, when we talk about the incremental backup, the first one will be called the base, and all the one after that will call the delta. So it means we don't use the word full anywhere outside the full backup. So this way, there's no confusion anymore. That's your first, Delta backup was called the full, but also the full backup. So that was really confusing. And now we got a base and Delta for incremental, and we got full for the full backup, and that's it. So it's a lot more clear. And when we add even more features for the backup in the next months, that will be a good base to start with. So we'll rename, after some time, a better naming anyway. So that's it for that. Let's go for the next big feature we have this month, which is called the Smart Host Reboot. So all in all, the idea of this feature is the ability to reboot your hosts, even if it's a single host in a single pool with only one machine, without any shared storage, to have a physical reboot of your host without any physical reboot of your VM. So it's not black magic. What we'll do basically is we will suspend the VM, so the VM memory will be saved into your local repository. And when your host will come back online, automatically we will resume those VMs. So from the VM operating system perspective, the uptime will never be changed. It's still online. You just have a kind of a leap, the time of your reboot. So if it took, I don't know, 5 minutes, then the OS will suddenly detect you have to adjust the clock to 5 minutes. But then every session, every connection, everything like this will be always in memory. So if you absolutely need to keep your VMs online without rebooting them when you restart the physical host, it's done automatically thanks to this feature. So you could achieve something similar, by doing that manually, but now just by clicking on a button, that will do it for you. And also, the extra stuff with that feature is even if you have one machine in your entire infrastructure, meaning your Xen Orchestra is also running in this host, we will detect it and we won't suspend the Xen Orchestra VM. That will be rebooted, but then because it's using auto power on, it will be restarted, and then at restart it will detect the suspend VM and resume them anyway. So this means even if Xen Orchestra VM is restarted, that's not a problem at all. So it works even in the situation, which is very flexible. Let's move on then. A small improvement for the project Pyrgos. So if you don't remember, it's a way to create a small a Kubernetes cluster in one click from your Xen Orchestra web UI. And what we did for this release, so first we changed the names by master node to control plane. That was the change done in Kubernetes since a bit ago. So we wanted to reflect the right terminology, and also now when you create a Kubernetes cluster, initially you only had one control plane, and it means if you lose the control plane, then you will lose the entire cluster. So now by default, if you select high availability for your Kubernetes cluster, it will automatically spawn 3 control plane nodes, meaning that you can lose one. That's not a problem, even 2. So that's more resilient. And in the future, we will leave you the capability to enter the number of nodes you want. But if you want HA, the minimum number is 3. So that makes sense. And that's why we started with this. So I expect more changes and improvements also during the next release regarding this. But for now, you could even play with it in a way that it will be resilient even if you have issues with one machine. Okay, so let's switch on another topic, which is Xen Orchestra Lite, Exolite. So Exolite is the Lite Xen Orchestra version running inside your XCP-ng machine, which is only made to manage a single pool, a single cluster. The biggest improvement that we had for this month is related to object subscription. So in very short, it means when you load your pool, instead of loading all the objects, it will only load the objects that are needed into each component. And if 2 components are sharing or needing the same objects, they will share it. So it means at first load, it's a lot faster. And if you are on a page that, for example, doesn't require to load any information related to for example, to your VMs, then the VMs object won't be downloaded from the network. So that's exactly something we want to get for the future of Xen Orchestra 6. So again, Exolite is a good lab on us to be sure that what we want to do for the future of Xen Orchestra will be done first into Exolite to test it. But we are really satisfied with the performance improvement we got into Exolite. We got new components. However, sadly, they are not really visible right now. It's more small components into bigger ones, but for the next month we'll have a lot of new features that you will be able to use directly in Exolite. We'll also have an interesting blog post coming from our UX designer Clémence, showing us all the future components and the way we are designing them. So stay tuned for that, maybe in 2 or 3 weeks or something like this. Okay, let's move on for the REST API. So no real big API endpoints for this feature, but more kind of the same like Exolite, so technical improvements under the hood. So basically now the REST API is streaming objects instead of sending them when the download is done. So it means less memory for large collection of objects, but also because those objects are streamed immediately when you make the request, it means it's a lot faster when you got very large collections to fetch. But we also decided this month to share some quick tips, an example when you use the REST API, so you could start to work with it. So for example, if in your browser you already logged into your Xen Orchestra, you could browse directly the XOA Xen Orchestra URL, go to /rest/v0, and then you will see all your objects in there. So this is also helpful to get quickly on information on what's going on, or getting some objects, or maybe helping you to create your future REST API requests directly by using your browser, because you get the JSON results directly through it. So it's a convenient tips that you could use to build real nice scripts. And about scripts, there is an example that we are giving, written by our team here, by Florent and Julian. So the idea of this script is to be able to list in a CSV file, so you could use for any inventory or compliance or whatever, on all VMs that are not inside any backup job. So this is written in JavaScript, but obviously any language that is able to make an HTTP request can do that. So what we wanted to do is to give you one example, because someone asked for something like this, but we open a thread in our forum. So if you want to share your own scripts or use cases or even requests, we'll be happy, to centralize that into a dedicated thread, because now the REST API is not an alpha version anymore. It's reliable. It works very well. We are really happy with it. So feel free to start to do more and more stuff on top of it. So final section, that's the Misc section, because there's a lot of small improvements that are, hard to put in a special section, I would say. It's mostly quality of life stuff. Like, for example, when you create a template, now the ISO will be, if there is an ISO attached to the VM, it will be automatically ejected, because if you don't do that and you use the template after, I don't know, removing the ISO repository or even the ISO, then the VM won't boot or have issues. So to avoid this, now it's done by default. Thanks, Cécile, for the feedback on this, because that's the way we work. It's important that our users are testing things, reports when it could be improved, and that's why we made that feature. Now you can also see who created a VM and from which template it's coming. So it's better to have the whole history of your VM. We made various changes regarding how we connect to older Xen server versions, and it could cause some issues, but those versions are end of life. So I will kind of go very fast on this section, but just to let you know, there's an option to deal with those very old versions. But if you are still using, for example, a 7.1 or any 7. Whatever, by the way, or even worse, the 6. Whatever, you are really outdated. You should upgrade to XCPNG or even Xen server, whatever, but you should upgrade. If you need assistance on that, that's part of our services. So we could, provide you the migration assistance, but don't stay on those old versions, because they also have security issues that are not fixed anymore. So it's important to upgrade, and be aware that you can even live migrate from an old Xen server version to XCPNG. So there's no excuse. You must upgrade very fast, as soon as possible. Two last things for this release. Now the Xen Orchestra config is compressed, and you could use also still encryption on top of it. Obviously, it's not huge, because the configuration itself is only maybe 20 kilobytes, but with compression it's only half of that, so it's still a win. And also it might be useful for a future exciting feature with your Xen Orchestra configuration. So stay tuned. Maybe next month we'll have a really interesting stuff for that. And finally, in the dashboard health view, when you list all the storage repositories sorted by used space, and if you are more than 90%, it will be in red, and more than 80, it will be in orange. In this section, we also displayed the free space remaining for your storage repository, because sometimes just having the symbol and the color gives you an idea. But if you have very large storage, maybe only having 15% is not that bad, because you have, I don't know, 20 terabyte or 30 terabyte, and then even 15% of that is still huge. So with now the amounts written directly, it's easier to know where you are on this. But keep in mind that in general, except for very large storage, you should really be careful when you have more than 80%, and even more than this, it could be dangerous at some point. So that's why we truly wanted to give you that information. So that's it for me. As you can see, that's a pretty reasonable release. And for the closing thoughts, I will let Mark do that.
Yeah, thank you, Oliver. So I have two things to add to this awesome release already. So first thing is that Xen Summit is coming very soon. So we will have exciting news to share with you in June, because it's at that moment. And very fresh news, not even yet announced. We will also have someone that will be at the Dutch Cloud Hosters event. So this is mainly an event for professionals of the cloud industry, working in Sweden and in Denmark. So we will have Razvan, which is our newly hired channel partner manager. So if you have the opportunity to be there, he will be giving a short speech. That's really fresh news from this morning, to be honest. So we are really exciting because we are working a lot on the evolution of the product of Xen Orchestra and XCP-ng, but we are also a lot of things that are coming on the other parts of the company. So stay tuned for more news about that. And that's it for me. Thank you, Oliver, for covering this massive release. And see you next month, everyone. Thank you.
See you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.